Hello everybody, here is Marcus Reed speaking. This is part 3 of the Consciousness-Based Universe series. And in this part 3, I will speak about point 4, quantum fluctuations, proto-consciousness, and will make a first attempt trying to define what consciousness is, the soul is, an emotion is, intention, and then at the very end, when we have all these definitions or descriptions, then we can define what energy is. The statement energy is mc square, relating energy to mass and speed, describes a certain case, but is from my view not a definition. In my world, energy is a function of time and consciousness and intention, and it turns out that an intention and a broken symmetry are identical phenomena, and a broken symmetry is what makes something virtual into something observable. We'll get into that just now. So, if we have a time-symmetric energy conversion process, mass behaves as if it was mechanical, and then in that case we can say mc square. But consciousness is, from my view, in first instance a function of time and consciousness. Consciousness uses time as an energetic tool, and via its intention, meaning via its broken symmetry, the flow of time is structured into the observable reality that we have all around us. Okay, so let's get started. This is a short video clip. I find that brilliant, with Larry King and Dr. Eben Alexander about consciousness, so have a look at that.
It turns out there is a scientific revolution going on now about the mind-brain discussion, the relationship between the two, that is extraordinary. And I think it's going to lead to a complete shift in our worldview that is unprecedented. And this living in a mindful universe is really about that scientific revolution.
Are you discounting whether the brain controls consciousness?
No, I think what we would say is the brain is a reducing valve or filter that allows primordial consciousness in. That is, the brain is not the creator of it. You cannot explain all of the details of human experience, especially all the evidence for non-local consciousness, the evidence for things like reincarnation, past life memories in children, indicative of reincarnation, things like that, if you think the brain is the producer of consciousness.
So what is the producer?
Consciousness is what exists and generates the entire universe. It's the fundamental ground state.
So this is my consciousness now, right?
It's all consciousness. It's all generated within consciousness. I mean, the thing to remember is we're under, we discuss in the book, what we call the supreme illusion, and that is that the brain and mind are very good at convincing us that all this stuff around us is out there. But what you're actually experiencing is a model deep within mind that is supposed to represent something that is out there. But I think that's where it's important to point out the mystery of quantum physics, because the experiments in quantum physics keep showing us in no uncertain terms that consciousness is fundamental, that the conscious observer and our free will has everything to do with determining outcomes. It's not determined by mechanistic chemical reactions and the laws of physics and chemistry applied to the brain.
Doesn't it almost destroy everything you learned?
Absolutely not. In fact, it opens the door to a far broader understanding, because what we're saying is the brain is simply a reducing valve that allows certain conscious states to exist. And this is where, from the quantum physical standpoint, it's really getting at what's known as the observer. That is the deep mystery, is the awareness of existence. And what I would submit is that we're conscious in spite of our brain. And so, in fact, the big surprise and kind of the practical lesson for human beings is that when your physical brain and body die, your conscious awareness actually expands tremendously.
What?
Yeah, I found that very interesting. He's also saying that consciousness is actually not created in the brain, it's somewhere else, from my view, in the domain of quantum fluctuations, and that everything is consciousness based, and I harmonize a lot with that view, and I think Dr. Alexander Eben has put it in very good words, and I resonate with it. And yeah, just to have some fun, here's another short video uh, speaking also about the mechanical approach with John Cleese. I really had a good laugh when I heard that, so we'll have a short listen to what he has to say about the God gene and the scientific community, in fact. So let's have a go.
Hello. We scientists have now located a gene which we scientists believe gives people the need to believe in God. In other words, this God gene releases chemicals into our body which create the impression that there is meaning in the universe. And this God gene is just here, between the gene which we scientists now know makes us eat coconut ice cream after a fish dinner, and this gene here, which causes people with weak egos to grasp around desperately for simple explanations. Now, the discovery of this God gene is a big step forward in our quest to show that every bit of human behavior can be explained away mechanically, because we've now also located the gene which makes some people believe that every piece of human behavior can be explained away mechanically. And it's here, right next to the gene that makes you go to see Nicolas Cage movies, so that's another puzzle solved. And right under this gene, which can cause you to forget that since the 1920s, quantum physics has destroyed forever the idea that everything can be explained mechanically. Now, the gene which causes us to forget this obvious fact is very dominant in some people, especially me. And we scientists now know that it's closely linked to this gene here, which gives you such a weak sense of self that you hang on to anything that makes you feel more secure emotionally, whether it's fundamentalist religion or a reductionist view of the universe, which is right over this gene here that makes you want to punch people in the head when they take the scientific process and subject it to their pathological literal-mindedness.
Yeah, that's John Cleese. So what he's saying is that, people with a weak sense of self tend to believe in a mechanical worldview. I just find that pretty funny. And when you look at the quantum mechanical approach, where things are getting harder to understand, yeah, you need also a certain courage to do that, because you have to admit that a lot of things are just still not understood at all. And I take it a bit further even, and I'm convinced the universe is unlimited in any sense. It's unlimited in age, unlimited in size, unlimited in complexity. And we are somewhere, and everything is literally made up from consciousness. Okay, but I'll get a bit more into that. So here on this picture, I put this together. And so let's start on the right hand side here. The pianist, the guy who's playing the piano, that is our soul. Our soul exists now and at all times, probably in the domain of quantum fluctuations, in the domain of the 0-point energy, a superconducting and superfluid domain that has the ability to store an imprint, meaning memories, like morphogenetic fields or via the microtubules, memories of thoughts and so on. And so our soul, that is who we really are. That is where our actual I identity is. That is what we are. And now we have the quantum critical biomolecules. For example, the water molecules. Water is quantum critical from my point of view, because the hydrogen bridge oscillations at room temperature are also driven by quantum fluctuations, and there's a lot in the literature about it, and that makes, from my view, water a quantum critical molecule par excellence, so to speak. So what I see is that the protein folding process is driven by water molecules, and the water molecules get their information to fold the proteins from the quantum fluctuations. That's where the actual construction plan for everything is. It's not in the DNA, it's not in the mRNA and so on. It is in the quantum fluctuations. And water seems to be the interface of first instance, or a interface of a primary instance, how shall I call it? And then the water has a strong effect. It can determine what happens when to the DNA, how the and how the microtubules are oscillating, because the microtubules are filled with water molecules and they are swimming in water. I mean, the water molecules are by far the most abundant molecules in the body, and so I see here that we are here and we are living in our body for the 90 years or whatever we are here on this planet, or in this life. And what I am also saying is that I think the word incarnation is maybe a too strong word. We are not getting born here. We are just shifting our point of focus from the domain of quantum fluctuations into a thermodynamic body for a few decades, and then when we die, we don't die. We are just pulling back, so to speak, the focus of our attention into the domain of quantum fluctuations. So this phrase of getting born and dying are two strong phrases. There is just a shifting of perspective. Okay, so let's give it a try and define what consciousness is. Our proto-consciousness, the soul. I think our soul exists not in this universe, in this thermodynamic universe. It exists in this other universe, which is right now, right here, all around us, but we just don't see it because it's energetically weaker. Anyway, at room temperature, it's energetically weaker, but it's there. And quantum criticality has access to this energetically weaker domain, even at room temperature. So our soul could exist possibly as a stable feedback loop information flow in the superfluid and superconducting domain of quantum fluctuations. And the microtubules and all other quantum critical biomolecules, they represent the access code to our soul. So quantum criticality gets access to the soul, and and all life forms, living beings, that they have biomolecules, they are quantum critical, and that's what makes them alive. Quantum criticality makes dead molecules alive, if you want to put it in a simple language, or want to put it that way. Okay, let's get to the next slide. Now, what is consciousness? Consciousness here in this real world, in the, well, I mean, the other side is also as real as this one. Every world is real, or everything is a simulation. You can put it as you like. I don't sympathize with these phrases. Everything is an illusion and nothing does exist. We just have to say goodbye to the mechanical, not changing and static worldview. That is all. It's a consciousness-based universe, and therefore everything is real. Like in the film Matrix, as Morpheus was asking, what is reality? And he said it's the interpretation of information, and that's what it's about. So we just have to get used to that thought. So what is consciousness in this thermodynamic, electromagnetic, if you want, reality? I will read what I wrote. Definition: consciousness in that moment when information is steadily reintegrated in a feedback looped way, information becomes self-aware. So that is sort of this toroidal, well, it could be visualized possibly as a toroidal dynamic. It's a feedback loop, a recursive information flow quality. And consciousness in this thermodynamic domain is a side effect that automatically comes into play when information moves in a feedback loop way. But that doesn't happen on its own, because a feedback loop information flow system in the thermodynamic domain, that would entropize straight away. It does not imprint, it does not hold it upright, because our thermodynamic domain is not superconducting, it's not superfluid, and that's why it entropizes, and or that's one of the reasons why it entropizes, and that's why. So it's just a play on words. Strictly spoken, this electromagnetic universe is not conscious in that sense. It becomes conscious via access to quantum fluctuations. However, every atom is the expression of an intention of consciousness, and every atom, every electron, every proton is in itself quantum critical. Just the hotter you get, or to put it the other way around, the colder you get, the more coherent a quantum critical corporation can become. That's why we have this temperature window for at which temperature life as we know it can occur, which doesn't mean that life can occur at other temperatures, but then you need other pressures and a completely different environment probably. So this electromagnetic universe or thermodynamic universe becomes conscious via access to the quantum fluctuation. So that's why I'm saying, in addition, this information flow in the thermodynamic domain must include access to quantum fluctuations. A feedback loop information flow within and between the classical and quantum fluctuations is needed. And quantum criticality bridges the thermal universe, the thermodynamic universe, with the quantum fluctuation universe. So that is the bridge, or the mechanism that merges together these two worlds. Okay, now I want to define what an emotion is. Now, as I said in part 2, when we have an information coming in to our eyes, it goes from the eyes, from the thermodynamic domain, directly to the quantum fluctuations. There the information is processed by our soul. Then we make a decision, or we have an intention or a thought, and that thought is sort of reflected back to the classical domain via quantum criticality. So the quantum critical microtubules are then triggered. The microtubules tell the neurons when to fire in which direction an electrical pulse, and then after a few pulses have been fired, so to speak, then we become aware of that thought in this thermodynamic reality. That's why we, our consciousness is sort of a bit delayed with a few by a few tenths of a second. So I say an emotion is an electromagnetic coherence between cells that can also cause the rush when I have fear or whatever. Is an electromagnetic coherence that is created by a quantum critical reflection. And what I mean by quantum critical reflection is information comes in via our senses, and then it is transferred directly to our soul domain, to the quantum fluctuations. There it's processed, then the soul makes a decision, and then this information is being channeled backwards via the quantum critical nature of biomolecules to the thermodynamic domain. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Intention is a very fundamental thing, and I think it's the key for all work processes. As I elaborated on other presentations, a work process presupposes a pressure difference, meaning a broken symmetry, and a broken symmetry is the tool that makes something or converts something virtual into something observable. So let me read out first what I wrote here, and then we get into that. Definition: intention. The actual seat of our I identity is within the domain of quantum fluctuations. That's here, down here, where our soul is. There our soul creates intentions. It can create thoughts, it can whatever. An intention is the desire to change a situation, whatever it may be. And it really doesn't matter what it is. It is just changing a situation. And a change of a situation must include a pressure gradient of some kind. And a pressure gradient of some kind and a broken symmetry are identical phenomena. So an intention, meaning a broken symmetry, exists as a feedback looped information flow within the superconducting and superfluid domain of quantum fluctuation that is transferred to the thermodynamic domain via rotation, via the quantum critical nature. And these quantum fluctuations, they are energetically weaker at room temperature, for example, but if they rotate, the stronger the intention, the stronger the rotation, so to speak, and then when the intention is strong enough, these quantum fluctuations, they start to structure the thermal fluctuations, and then things can fade in and manifest in this reality, and that's how sort of the grand architects, they are creating every atom. In this way, the virtual particles from the quantum fluctuations start to structure the virtual particles of the thermodynamic domain, what I just explained, and trigger an observable work process. From my view, all observable thermodynamic phenomena are created by this mechanism, including atoms, by conscious intentions that are created by conscious beings. So these conscious beings, the grand architects, I call them, are possibly existing here in the domain of quantum fluctuations, and by their intentions they are transferring information, they are controlling the rules of nature via that, and every particle is quantum critical in itself. It has some kind of quantum critical property, and the hotter it becomes, the less coherent, sort of the overall size of how big the coherence can be rolled out from the quantum fluctuations is reduced. So that's why superconductivity, for example, comes into play when you cool down system, not when you heat them up. For example, the superconductor becomes superconducting when the material is cold enough, and when it's cold enough, the phonons are influenced by quantum fluctuations, and these quantum fluctuation influenced phonons are able to pair electrons by brute force, so to speak, and then we see a superconducting phenomenon. So if you have, for example, a superconducting coil, and you cool it down, then you have to get the current going, and that is by opening the coil and putting in a voltage. So that voltage then presses upon the paired electrons, and the paired electrons now push upon the quantum fluctuation influenced phonons and get them going. So that needs a bit of a short time. But then once these quantum phonons are moving, there's an imprint in the domain of quantum fluctuations, and since that's a superconducting and superfluid domain, these quantum fluctuations influenced phonons will keep on carrying along the paired electrons around. So that's how superconductivity works, and that's how memory works, and the imprint due to morphogenetic fields, or making strontium titanate from paraelectric to ferroelectric via triggering it by red light, for example. So it's always the same mechanism. And also the mechanism for, let's say I'm in empty space, in air-free space between planets, and I have a stone and I throw a stone, it will move on forever, because once it's accelerated, then the way of how the atoms are being built up in relation to its local frame is in a superfluid domain, and that's why the stone keeps on moving more or less forever. Okay, so let's get to the next slide. There was intention, yeah. So what is information? And I see here a link between information, intention, and a broken symmetry. It comes down to the same phenomenon. Definition: information. Information is the phenomenon that tells the time, which is the source of energy, because time is the phenomenon that creates change or enforces change, how to get structured. Consciousness has an intention, and an intention and information are identical. And via that intention, meaning the broken symmetry, the flow of time gets structured into an observable. So a thought, for example, a soul here, the proto-consciousness creates a thought, and that thought exists as a broken symmetry. And within that broken symmetry, there are many small broken symmetries which make up the fine structure of that thought. And the broken symmetry, again, that is information, and this information tells the classical virtual particles how to get structured. And this structuring process is then seen as an observable. And that is how an intention is rolled out from the quantum fluctuations into the thermodynamic domain. That's how it works from my point of view. Okay, now let's have a look how incarnation, how the steps of incarnation possibly could look like. Now, this is the information that I'm giving now is a bit thin, and it is I'm just trying to open a door here in a certain direction, and we'll see if that points into a fruitful direction or not. Okay. Anyway, here on the very left side we have a picture from the fourth phase of water by Professor Gerald Pollack, and we have a drop of water here at the top picture, which is blue. That's about minus 3 degrees Celsius about, and then this liquid water of minus 3 degrees. Water can be cooled down way below 0 degrees Celsius without freezing when it is not vibrated or if it's not contaminated by minerals and so on. So, and then you shake it a little bit, and then the minus 3 degrees water will freeze into minus 3 degrees ice, which is down here. And during the freezing process, it gives off an infrared flash. This is not, it can be associated to heat here, but this is not, I'm not sure if this is heat in the common sense. I mean, the near infrared and far infrared is, if that is really temperature, is not 100% clear to me. Anyway, there's an infrared flash being given off, and I think this is happening because we have here a change in the quantum critical nature of water, because liquid water and solid ice water, they are in a different quantum critical state. And during this state from liquid water to ice water, both is at minus 3 degrees Celsius, the water gives off an infrared flash. So there is something happening towards the quantum fluctuations. So now let's have a look here at this picture, the second picture from the left. That is a human egg that is being fertilized. The sperm has just entered into the egg, and once the sperm is in the egg, there is a quantum critical change happening, and that must happen because now the difference between the unfertilized and the fertilized egg is the unfertilized egg does not split up and grow to an embryo, but only now when the sperm is there, the other information, then it can grow. So that requires a different access to the master plan, which is in the quantum fluctuations, and that would include a quantum critical transformation of some kind. And this is a video, I think it's the only one up to now, which shows what happens when the egg gets fertilized. So let's have a look at that. So I hope I can get that done here. Yeah, this is now the video. The sperm is in, and that is an infrared flash. What happens is that zinc ions are given off from the egg and they spread out, and thereby an infrared flash is given off, and that was shown on the film. So possibly this infrared flash on the outside of the cell relates to a quantum critical phase transition. What would be good is if in the future more precise pictures could be made, because I assume that there should also be some kind of infrared flash, maybe a weaker one, from within the cell, because now the cell has a different access to the quantum fluctuation. So maybe it becomes later in, because this first flash is just to protect the cell so no additional sperm cells can enter, and it's like a coating, this giving off of zinc ions, and maybe it needs another few seconds or minutes until the sperm has connected its DNA with the DNA of the egg, and in that moment when these two DNA strands connect, there should be a quantum critical phase transition, which should show in an, or possibly is shown in an infrared flash. So if everyone has access to something like that, that will be interesting to look at. And then sort of the egg splits up, and so we would have a first level of incarnation when the DNAs are melting together, and we have an infrared, and that we have an infrared flash indicating that we this life form has access to a different domain within the quantum fluctuations, which would be the first attachment from a structure within the soul domain. And then we have a first heartbeat. Now I hope, no, it does not show the film here. I don't know why it's not coming up. Okay, it doesn't show here. Maybe I can, wait a minute. Maybe I can, no, it does, I can't, yeah, visible, okay, here's, yeah, okay, now I can show. So this is now the very first heartbeat of a heart in a zebrafish. With a human heart, it should be the same. And the question is, what is causing the very first heartbeat? Because that is an electromagnetic coherence of many cells doing the same thing at the same time in the heart. Where do they get the information from? From my view, from the quantum fluctuations. Now, interestingly, the first heartbeat in humans is after about 40 days. And now in the Yevamot 69b, that's in the Talmud, the fetus is during the first 40 days just water, and then it starts, and then the first level of the soul is incarnated. Now Aristotle believed that the soul enters after 40 days. Sadhguru, he's sort of a guy on YouTube that is quite popular, and he suggests that after 40 to 48 days the soul incarnates, and maybe that relates with the first heartbeat. I could imagine that. And anyway, there are other time frames given, so depending on the religion and whatever, usually they say between 40 and 120 days. Anyway, this 40-day mark corresponds more or less with the first heartbeat. So I could imagine that a next level of incarnation is happening when we have the first heartbeat. And it's like as if a soul can see the fertilized egg, and then the souls can decide, should we incarnate here? And then a first step of incarnation is happening 40 days about after the fetus is growing, so that's a tiny little embryo. But the soul is not yet properly incarnated, I think. And it's sort of like a lasso that is thrown around and says, okay, I resonate with this embryo, so let's see how it goes on. And then during birth, the soul then enters completely into the embryo. Anyway, then we are living our life, and then at some stage we are dying. And what is shown here apparently is a human that is dying. And when it dies, it gives off an infrared flash again. So that would be the phase when the soul is leaving the body, and that also creates a quantum critical change in relation with the quantum fluctuations and the water molecule, and the water molecules would produce that infrared flash. So maybe it would make sense to focus on the brief radiation of an infrared flash during the incarnation process, and maybe by doing that the incarnation process can be understood in a better way. Now I want to get back to my crystal cell that I developed from 1998 onwards. There's an interesting phenomenon that relates to the incarnation process, or could relate. Now we know that the water content in the polycrystalline silicate is critical. So, and since we have no cooling under load, which precise calorimetric measurements have shown, the energy, the electrical power from the cell does not come from thermal fluctuations. It doesn't convert the ambient heat into electrical power, so it converts possibly the quantum fluctuations into electrical power that would fit the bill. Now let's assume it does that. Now, what we have also seen is a dependence on the temperature. So the purple curve here is the temperature, and it starts here at about nearly 39 degrees Celsius. Then we are cooling it down to 26 degrees Celsius. So here the degrees Celsius relate to the purple curve only, not to the white curve. So we are cooling from 39 degrees Celsius to about 26 degrees Celsius, and then we are slowly heating it up over a few hours, up again to 39 degrees and staying on a plateau, and then we're cooling it down again to 25 degrees Celsius or whatever, 24, I don't know. Now anyway, what is interesting is when we cool it down from 39 to 26 degrees Celsius, we have one nice curve. And the white curve is the voltage on a crystal cell or reed cell under load. So there's a resistor attached, and that's the voltage. So the voltage curve follows exactly the temperature curve. So the warmer it is, the more power; the colder it is, less power. That's why we thought actually here are thermal fluctuations converted, but they're not. It has to do actually with, it's like an inverse Mpemba effect. Hot water freezes faster than cold water. That temperature is just the door. Water at a certain temperature can, warmer water can let in more power from quantum fluctuations, and then from 37 degrees Celsius it doesn't do that anymore. Now anyway, let's get back to this chart here. The purple curve, the temperature goes down, the power curve goes down, and now we are heating it up again, and this white line should follow the purple line all the way up here, but it doesn't. It heats up, and then here, that is 34 degrees Celsius. At 34 degrees Celsius there's a first cutoff, and that's reproducible, by the way. And then it needs sort of an hour until it recovers a little bit, but it doesn't really recover. And then at 37 degrees Celsius, we can see here is the curve starts to drop down, and then it doesn't recover at all anymore. So above 37 degrees Celsius, the reed cell does not convert quantum fluctuations into power in an efficient way anymore. Now, interestingly, is the male testicles on humans and animals, they are outside of the body. And the temperature of the testicles is known. It's between 34 and 35 degrees Celsius. That could indicate that the sperm cells, before they get closer to the egg, must be in a colder temperature because they are in a different quantum critical state. And then in the moment of orgasm and so on, they are in a warmer state. And that changes the quantum critical nature, and now they're ready to do what they ever do at nearly 37 degrees Celsius. So maybe this is something we can, one should focus as well, how incarnation works. So the temperature between 34 and the blood temperature, which is 36.6 degrees Celsius, I think. Okay, let's get to the next slide. I want to briefly get into so-called near-death experiences. I find that very interesting because there are so many thousands of reports, and the pattern is always the same. And people continue living and experiencing afterlife, and they experience all sorts of things. And there is a certain category of near-death experiences that are interesting to me. And they're all interesting, but these ones are especially interesting. And we have near-death experiences from atheists that have a negative or hell-like experience. And they have like negative beings around them once they have died, and they are scared as you can get. And then they were thinking about, my God, what did my mother or my dad tell me when I was young? When you have a problem. And sometimes they said, believe in Jesus Christ, because they were Christians, as an example. And when these people, being atheists, have a near-death experience and they have a hell-like experience, and then they say, oh my God, Jesus Christ, please help me, in that moment these negative beings are going away. And that I find fascinating because that's a phenomenon that we observe again and again. So could it be that Jesus Christ is a something like a mediator that helps us to navigate between the other side and this side, and helps us to move over to the other side in a good way, and that opens, of course, up a lot of other things, but I don't want to get into that now. I just find that interesting. Now, and could it be that Jesus Christ is sort of like some kind of mediator between the thermodynamic reality and the domain of quantum fluctuations where our soul exist? And there's another interesting book by a guy called Bill Wiese, or Wise, I don't know how to pronounce it. And the book is called 23 Minutes in Hell. And he had a vision that's not a near-death experience, and he was gone, so to speak, like unconscious for 23 minutes. And during these 23 minutes, he had literally a hell-like experience. And when he was praying to Jesus Christ in that state, he was pulled out of this vision. And so here again we have an experience that matches with the near-death experiences. So, but a vision and a near-death experience is not the same, but it is an intensive experience that consciousness has. So this is something that is happening. It's real. So that's why I am asking the question: could it be that the grand architects, sort of the concept of God, exists within the domain of quantum fluctuations here in the 0-point energy domain? That's an idea. I think that is interesting. Okay, so how I laid it out is the following way. I think we are living in two universes at the same time. They are right now, right here. And as I said in an earlier slide, this is the thermodynamic reality with the virtual particles creating the flow of time, and structuring the virtual particles creates mass, and you can describe time dilation and work process and everything in a practical way by that. And then we have the 0-point fluctuations. That's a different time flow, a different universe, and they overlap via this quantum critical window. And for example, the Debye temperature, up to from 0 Kelvin until the Debye temperature, the influence of quantum fluctuations is rather significant, and that's why biomolecules have their Debye temperature above the room temperature, for example, water. Now, what I assigned to the classical fluctuations as an attempt, I don't know if it's right, this is the observable reality that we can see, and the work process we know are entropizing. We have the conservation of energy, and we can relate energy to mc square, so energy behaves like in a mechanical way. And now I'm saying this universe, our thermodynamic reality, becomes conscious via access to quantum fluctuations. So without a soul, no consciousness in this reality. Then we have in this reality the normal conductivity. It's not superconducting. We have the speed of light that is known, the electromagnetic speed of light, and I assign, I hope that's right, the electromagnetic strong and weak force to that. However, the strong force, I'm not enough physicist to determine what that is, or to what it could be assigned. Now, here we have the quantum fluctuations, and that's a non-observable domain. Anyway, from our perspective right now, during a near-death experience, that domain would become visible. Then work processes can show negative entropy. It's a creating domain. It can show the phenomenon of self-organization, like you put a seed of a plant into the soil and it starts self-organizing, just structures the light and the minerals and so on into a life form. So it has a self-organizing quality. It has the quality of information imprint, like our memory via the microtubules, or making strontium titanated ferroelectric by triggering it with red light. So that's a consciousness creating domain. It can also store morphic fields. When a certain process happens in a certain way, then it becomes more probable that that process will happen again in the same way. That is the idea from Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. And these morphic fields are imprinted, from my view, in the domain of quantum fluctuations. The quantum fluctuations are a superconducting domain. That's why we have to cool down stuff to get them superconducting. Or when they're not that cold, at least they must be in a quantum critical state of some kind. Then some liquids can become superfluid at extremely cold temperatures. We have a non-local aspect. We have action at a distance, and sometimes even nearly instantaneous information transfer. Then our proto-consciousness or soul exists within that domain, and the speed of light, meaning the speed of information in that domain, is I don't know what it is, but it's not, it has nothing to do with the speed of light in the electromagnetic domain, and I assign the gravitational force to that. And these two universes are overlapping, and that is the quantum critical bridge or quantum critical window. That's why I'm saying quantum criticality is the bridge between both worlds, that it merges them together. And let's assume the grand architects are living in the domain of quantum fluctuations. That would mean that there are conscious beings who determine the quality of, how does a proton behave, what is a field, and so on. So the show is run by beings that exist within the quantum fluctuations, and they're transferring this information via their intentions to our universe, and that's why it is what it is. And so that's why I say quantum criticality itself is like an eye through which the grand architects can see our thermodynamic world and determine the rules of nature. I avoided the phrase here, the laws of physics. I think there are no laws. There are rules of nature, and they are flexible, and consciousness determines how they roll out. Okay, let's get to the next slide. A short comment to astrology. Now, when our soul, let's assume our souls and gravity exist both in the domain of quantum fluctuations. That would help us to explain that there might be something to astrology. Now, I have to say I'm not a big fan of astrology. I actually try to avoid it. However, there's one just a physical aspect to it that could be mentioned. And here in that picture on the right hand side, we see our solar system, and we have the planets at certain positions, and these planets, they create a certain gravitational fingerprint at a certain point in time. Now, otherwise there are no planets. These so empty space is empty, so the gravitational influence upon Earth would be weak, but it is 24 hours a day, and it would act directly on our souls. So the gravitational fingerprint of the solar system could have a weak or mild influence upon possibly upon our personality. So that is an aspect that I find interesting to mention here in that with that topic. Okay, let's go to the next slide. I'm sure you remember the great tsunami in Japan in March 2011, and a lot of people died very quick without a pre-warning, so to speak. And having said what I said, we could now make an attempt to describe what a ghost is. And a ghost could be a soul, a proto-consciousness without a physical body, obviously, but when the intention of a soul gets strong enough, then it could start to structure the classical fluctuations, and then that soul would slowly fade into visibility in this reality. Now, what was interesting in relation with this tsunami is that there were so many ghost sightings and reports. It was amazing. They even speak of a ghost epidemic in a certain area. And now I view the soul as a stable feedback loop information flow within the quantum fluctuations, and that can trigger the structuring process of thermoclassical fluctuations. And as I said, that's the same way in how you make an atom or observable reality in general. So if an intention of a soul is strong enough, it can structure the thermal fluctuations and so forth that an optically visible body appears. Also, a seemingly physical interaction could be possible, depending on the degree of intention, depending on how intensive the thermodynamic virtual particles are structured. And there's even a series, a Netflix series called Unsolved Mysteries, which is called Tsunami Spirits. There is a report about that situation, and in this book here by Richard Lloyd Perry. Now, and here it says, post-disaster Tohoku came to be overpopulated with ghosts, with multiple reports of sightings. Ghost stories were common. Dead women would visit old friends in their temporary housing and sit down for a cup of tea, leaving dampness on the cushion she was imagined to have been sitting on. And here, very interesting, and that's how the whole thing came out. A taxi driver would pick up a man asking to be taken to an address that no longer existed, only to find halfway through the drive or through the journey that the passenger in the rear seat was invisible. Now, what happened here is that taxi drivers, they take someone for a ride for an hour or whatever, and then after half an hour, that passenger has dissolved in thin air. And the problem is now that the clock is running, and the question is, who is going to pay the bill? And now the boss of the taxi driver was asking him, hey, what's going on? Who were you taking? And since many taxi drivers, they had no explanations for that, and just the bill wasn't paid. That's how that whole story came into the public, and that's amazing. That is such a common phenomenon, and I could imagine that many ghost sightings are not even recognized as ghost sightings. You see someone standing beside the road and just looking, and you just pass that person, you think it's a real person, but in fact it's a ghost. And after you have passed a few minutes later, that body has just dissolved again in thin air. And that happens because the people died so quickly that they didn't understand that they are dead, and their belief that they are still alive in this reality is so strong, and they have such a strong intention of continuing to exist here, that they just don't accept it. And and that is what brings them into existence. Now down here it says, whether one believes in the supernatural is beside the point. The point, according to one Buddhist priest who exorcised many tsunami-induced ghosts, is that people really believed they were seeing them. Tohoku's ghost problem, which is called the ghost problem, became so pervasive that university academics started to cataloging stories, while priests, Christian, Shinto and Buddhist alike, found themselves called on repeatedly to quell unhappy spirits that could in extreme cases even possess the living. And there's a sociology graduate thesis by Yuka Kudo from Tohoku Gakuin University. I can only give her my congratulations, and her courage, or I don't know if it's he or she, I can only speak out my courage for doing that, and interviewing actually the taxi drivers to make this whole thing public. So, and there are many other examples where someone had an accident, and then the relatives saw that body in a certain situation, and so that's a very common thing. And but still, most people just don't speak about it because they just have not the slightest clue of how to deal with it or how to explain it. Okay, now we're going to the last slide. Now where sort of I gave just a vague idea of what consciousness could be, what an intention is, what a soul is, what a ghost is, and so on. We can now define what energy is, and it's all about what energy is. Now, in my other presentations in relation with the reed cell and the ferroelectric crystal oscillator, I showed how a common electrical circuit works, and here's a picture again of the circuit. What we see in the background is the battery, and here in the foreground is the filament of the light bulb, and the electron, shown as a sailboat, moves through the filament, and the electron is converting the electrical field, which is shown here by this red and blue virtual particle, and which represents a broken symmetry in space. and that electric field is converted into light and heat, which also consists of a broken symmetry. It's an ongoing asymmetrizing process of space itself. And so the electron acts as a mediator. It converts the electric field into light and heat. So it behaves like a sailboat. And what does a sailboat do? It converts the energy from the wind into bow waves. And so my point was that energy is primarily coming from the wind, because a sailboat does, if a sailboat has no wind, it doesn't sail, and that's a fact. And it's also a fact, if you have electrons in an electrical circuit and you have 0 volts, then you will have no current. A current can only occur when there's a voltage. So the voltage pressure is the primary and true energy deliverer in every electrical circuit, and the voltage exists in space as a broken symmetry that is permanently rebuilt by permanently and newly appearing virtual particles, and that energy is totally free. So the battery does not supply energy to its load. The energy just separates the charges, meaning it asymmetrizes space-time within the power station, within the battery. And as soon that is done, the door is open, the potential flow, the voltage is flowing over the circuit, and then sort of asymmetrizing the whole circuit. And this broken symmetry within the filament of the light bulb gets symmetrized again, meaning that one broken symmetry is converted into another broken symmetry. And by this broken symmetry conversion process, the potential receive an observable characteristic. That is what we see as observable energy. However, now, a question that I did not answer in these past videos is, who determines how this broken symmetry will roll out into an observable? And that is consciousness. And now we can give the complete definition of what energy is based upon these broken symmetries and consciousness and intention. So energy in the observable domain, in the thermodynamic domain, is asymmetry conversion. When one broken symmetry, the electrical field, for example, gets converted into other broken symmetries like light and heat, the broken symmetries or the broken symmetry conversion process itself is what we see as energy. So energy is asymmetry conversion. So, but now the question is, who is initiating that process? And that is consciousness. And consciousness has an intention. And an intention is the desire to change something, whatever it might be. A change of any kind includes a pressure gradient. And a pressure gradient and a broken symmetry are identical phenomena, as I've shown earlier on. So consciousness has an intention, and via that intention, which is a broken symmetry, the flow of time used as an energetic medium is structured into the observable reality that we see all around us. So what I'm saying is, consciousness uses time as an energetic tool to create a capacity to do work. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and thanks for watching. See you next time.